Hi, everyone, and welcome to our conversation and brief overview on the Enneagram number 9. So I am excited to lead this little conversation today because the Enneagram 9 is my number. This is the first confession. You are soon going to learn what Pastor Corey's number and what Pastor Kayla's numbers are. We're each going to be leading our own. So I'm just going to start by sharing a little bit about the number 9, what 9s look like when they're healthy, what they look like when they're kind of average in the middle, and what an unhealthy 9 looks like. So when they are healthy and in a good spot, 9s are natural mediators. 9s can be flexible and inclusive. 9s are able to make decisions based on right priorities. And 9s can be really inspiring leaders and very self-actualized. When 9s are kind of average, middle of the road, they can seem very sweet and easygoing, but the reality is perhaps that underneath that they are a bit out of touch with their anger. 9s have a tendency to overlook themselves. They will stand up for justice for others, but they often have a hard time doing it for themselves. And unhealthy 9s, when you're not in a good spot, have trouble with decision making. They can become overly dependent on other people. They can engage in numbing behaviors to dull anger. So that could be anything from like overwatching Netflix shows to using drugs and alcohol, the whole shebang. And 9s can struggle to maintain that illusion, that outward illusion that everything is well and okay in their lives. A couple points about 9s. Generally speaking, 9s are easygoing and adaptable. Pretty even-tempered. 9s don't tend to sweat the small stuff. I'd say that's true for me. 9s tend to be pretty quick to love and slow to judge others. They can be free and easy and down to earth. But 9s are not strangers to the principle of inertia. Principle inertia says, when a body is in motion, it stays in motion. When a body is in rest, it stays at rest. And 9s start slow and slow down. So 9s can tend to have a little bit of trouble with starting projects or keeping things going, perhaps getting distracted in the middle and kind of losing interest, and then the projects can peter out. So something to talk about more later. Deadly sin, we talked about this a bit in our intro video, and we'll talk about it for each of our numbers. But each of the Enneagram numbers has like a sort of underlying, I guess deadly sin is the best way to say it, an underlying hard thing that we have to work through and figure out how to address. And for 9s, the deadly sin is sloth. So there is a desire for 9s to not be overly bothered by life, which I also can say is true as an Enneagram 9. That there tends to be kind of a disconnection from passion or motivation. And so it can be really a challenge for 9s to kind of light that fire within themselves and figure out how it is that they can get the energy to just rise up and be alive in the world. 9s can tend to be slothful also when it comes to paying attention. And that is not just like paying attention in conversation with others, but paying attention to our own like inner wants and needs and desires, paying attention to the gifts that we have or that we're developing, paying attention to kind of all the stuff that's like going on inside our own inner emotional world. Because we have this tendency to cling to this inner harmony. So when I said that we can be people who just want to like be unbothered by life, I think this is where it really clicks in. That pursuit of like a levelness, that pursuit of inner harmony, that like desire to just not be knocked off kilter by anything in life is a hard thing that 9s have to learn how to overcome. And part of the reason that exists is because 9s tend to be pretty out of touch with the emotion of anger. So for fear, 9s have this real deep-seated fear, and this is connected to our deadly sin of sloth, of expressing our preferences, of asserting our agenda. And we have that fear because underneath it all, we worry that if we express our preferences, that will somehow break or damage the important relationships that we have in our lives. So we don't want to put those things at risk, in addition to not, rocking the boat in any way. I have a couple of traits of 9s that I'll share as well. So here are a few traits. Nines tend to be self-forgetting and merging. So like I said, easy to forget preferences, easy to put other people's priorities first, easy to merge with others, let them make up the decisions in life. And that can be damaging because it can lead to a lot of self-erasure. Nines are also at the top of the Enneagram. So when you look at that diagram number, right, you see that nines are right at the very top. And one of the reasons that nines are at the top actually is because nines have a real ability to see through all of the other numbers' eyes. So nines, and I have experienced this in my own life, nines are able to see and experience what it means to be like a 5, or to step into the shoes of very occasionally of an 8, or to work and live in the mode of a 1 for a while. And so that is a real gift because it allows nines to connect with lots of people, but it also can be a real challenge because, gosh, then it's like so easy to just merge with others and say, well, today I'm a 4. And that's just how I'm going to go through the life because my friend's a 4 and we're hanging out. So something to pay attention to. Another trait of nines is that they can be ambivalent in their decision making. They often get torn between wanting to please others and wanting to defy them. This comes back to the kind of triad that nines have when we'll get into talking about stresses and places of security and the wings as well. But when nines are in a really healthy place, they tend to act like 3s, and that's when they do a really wonderful job of like wanting to please others and connect with others and be a healthy 3. And when nines are stressed, they tend to look more like unhealthy 6s. And 6s, as we'll talk about later on, are one of the most defiant numbers in the Enneagram. So nines are always torn between wanting to please people and wanting to defy them. And all of this comes back to a risk of disconnection.
Yeah, so tell me if this is a trait.
Yeah.
Some folks that in my head I'm kind of identifying as a 9, because they want to please others, they often agree to things, and then inside, because it's not what they wanted,
Yeah.
but they'll agree to it, and then it kind of leaks out their little toe in oozing ways.
Yes. Well, Pastor Corey, this connects to the next trait that I have listed for the traits of nines, which is passive aggression.
There you go.
So, Enneagram 9s do exactly that. Have a tendency to not want to risk that non-attachment with other people, and so say yes, have a hard time saying no to things, and then maybe feel resentful about it, and then it tends to leak out in a way that is not helpful for others. And so there's a real need for nines to be aware of that passive-aggressive tendency and to try to contradict that, and to practice being more direct in the way that they do things and live their lives. So important. Very important.
So is some of that also why nines tend to always be busy, but not necessarily with the thing that should be top priority, but maybe with the thing that's bringing them energy?
Pastor Kayla, you have listed number 1, 2, 3, 4 on my traits of nines. That is that nines tend to prioritize distractions. Yes. So for nines, this is often a defensive maneuver. Leave the essentials until last. Again, we're trying to keep the calm here. Like, we're trying to not rock the boat. So it's really easy, and again, this is so true in my own life, to get distracted by the things that are non-essential, the things that are maybe a little bit more interesting, the things that I want to do instead of the things that I need to do. So again, yes, another trait to pay attention to. For childhood wounds, again, our childhoods define us. They're really important, play important roles in who we are as adults. So what nines often heard, and this might not have been explicit in childhood, but sort of maybe the message that was in the air, was that your wants and opinions and desires and presence don't matter that much. Nines often played the role of mediator when they were kids in conflict, and they also learned how to merge with others to avoid conflict. So that's, it's one of the gifts that nines have, but it also comes perhaps out of a place of real, struggle as a kid, to not be seen and not being heard. So the easiest way to get around that is to just become like somebody else, to sort of be a mirror and reflect other people. I think the important thing for nines to remember, and this is one of those messages that I practice remembering in my own life, is that the absence of conflict is not the presence of peace. So avoiding conflict does not mean that my life will be smooth sailing all the way. There will always be conflict. And so the practice is to address that conflict. And the only way to get to true peace is to address things when they're wrong.
Resolve
To
conflict.
resolve conflict,
Yeah.
exactly. So the invitation for nines is to wake up and to say yes to adventure in your life, to practice not sleepwalking through life, to try to get in touch with your emotions, your inner state of being, to be able to say yes to conflict when it arises, and kind of all of those like inertia, energy driven things. So on the Enneagram, 8s have the most energy out of everybody, and 9s have the least amount of energy. So a real tendency to be sleepy. I mean, I love naps. I don't know if that's connected to my
I do too.
Enneagram
I was gonna say.
9-ness, but I will also say that if I have a long list of things to do, sometimes I do think to myself, I could do these things or I could take a nap. So it's important just to pay attention to all that stuff. But I hope what I'm illustrating and talking about this too from a personal perspective is that knowing about the Enneagram, knowing about my own number has offered me a perspective on myself that has been very, very helpful for me and helpful for my relationships with colleagues, with my spouse, with my family, with a whole bunch of different people, because the more you know about yourself, right, the more you know about how you move through the world, and the healthier you can do that. And so I hope that's come across in this conversation. But that's what I have about 9s, just a little bit of an overview.
Well, you talked about 8s having the most energy and
Mhm.
9s having the least energy, and we've talked about wings.
Yes.
So, right, how does the 9 relate with the wings, or
That is a really good question.
Pastor Corey?
Yeah, maybe Pastor Corey has some of that in the book. I can tell you, I mean, so I'm a 9-wing 1, so I can tell you that I take on and gravitate towards some of the like perfectionism of the 1 and some of the orderliness, and I can see that for sure in the way that I like orient things when I'm doing tasks. It's a little hard for me to articulate or remember 9-wing 8, but maybe
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have.
So the 9-wing 1
Yep.
has a strong sense of the difference between right and wrong. 1 energy helps these 9s stay a little more focused, so that they're able to accomplish more, which enhances their confidence. The 9 with the 8, this one is the most complex combination of any on the Enneagram, given that 8s need to go against power and 9s need to avoid conflict. 8s are energized by anger, while 9s avoid it at all costs. So even though our cores come out of these words that we don't like anger, it doesn't play the same role in each one. Like for a 9, it is the avoidance of anger, so the disconnect
Yeah.
of that core.
Yeah.
And for 8s, it was not. It was the connection with the core that drives them.
Well, and I'm glad 9-wing 8 was acknowledged as being very difficult, because it's really hard to imagine someone who identifies as a 9 and then moving towards an 8, just with how different they are. So hearing that complexity lifted up, I think, is an acknowledgement that sometimes it is really difficult to live into who we are.
Yes.
Yeah.
So true.
And who our identities are, and what we're called to do and to be.
Definitely. Well, maybe I'll just end with the healing message for the 9s. I thought that this was really beautiful. It spoke to me. So the healing message for the 9s is, we see you and your life matters. God didn't invite you to the party to live someone else's life. We need you here.
Nice.
I like that.